Hi. Hello. It's it's me. And this is Francisco de Goya. Not a self-portrait, but by one of his contemporaries, Lopez, in the later years of Goya's life. Actually, this is if Goya was born in 1746, and this was done in 1826. This was an 80-year-old man, and honestly, I think for 80, Goya does not look so bad in this portrait. Like this is a, I feel like this is a, this is like a pretty hard 60, for some people I've seen and met in the modern day. But here he was, age 80. By this time, he was, oh, rather close to hmm, expiring, to use a polite word. But in a lot of ways, by this time, he was already expired. He was deaf. He was disillusioned. He had disillusioned with his home country. I mean, Spain. At by 1826, he had moved to France, where he lived the remainder of his life. The last 4 years of his life or so, he spent in France, and so this is a man who has seen some shit, done some shit, been through some shit, and is kind of in the shit as far as his health and mental state and, well, just about everything. By this time, also, I believe his wife uh, had died. But anyway, he would die at age 82. So this was a he was right about there, the time this portrait was done. But he did live quite a bit of a life before he got here. One last note about while I have this, I'm on the subject of him being extremely old and decrepit and miserable. By this time, he had already gone through his so-called black paintings era, where he did the famous what people took to calling um, what people took to calling Saturn devouring his son, even though it was like the other black paintings, was painted directly on the walls of his home, uh, the last place he lived in Spain, I believe, before he emigrated to France. So by this time, he had also completed some of his most famous works. But before we get there, to his most well-known works and widely celebrated, isn't it wrong? The fact that his most widely known these days, celebrated and appreciated works were painted directly onto the walls of the last place he lived in his home country before he got so fed up with the political climate and the antics of the nobility that he left the country to die somewhere else, somewhere arguably worse at that time. In some ways, arguably better, but it's sort of that the grass is always greener, right? People have always, in many cases, appreciated what other people have more than what they have, right? But again, before we get to his death, emigration, he lived a very long life. He was actually born in a small village in Spain. He was the fourth child of six. Uh, he was a a lower middle class craftsman was his father. So I find this interesting about Goya because he, in many cases, when you're studying these old masters or uh, more prominent artists in any era, you'll find they're born to artists, bred to be artists. They lived somewhat comfortable lives, or at the very least, upper middle class lives, right? I believe some rather well known and well regarded Russian painters, for example, were the children of clerks, people in comfortably in touch with the upper classes. But his father was a lower middle class craftsman. He overlaid things in gold as a religious gilder. So, so he was born in a village to the lower middle class in Spain, the fourth child of six. His mother's family owned the house that they grew up in, and that family was they had a crest and they sort of had pretensions of nobility. They had a noble attitude, but they weren't so prominent, I'll say. He received a free education when he was through up to age 14, and some who knew Goya would say that he didn't come across as a very well educated man, and in many ways he wasn't. He had, you might say, his father's attitude toward art. It was a craft, right? It wasn't necessarily this highbrow vehicle for philosophy, for spiritualism and ideals, and all these things that the word art carries the sort of connotation. Uh, Goya had uh, a tradesman's attitude toward art in a lot of ways. People considered him very grounded, matter of fact, and maybe even jaded. Uh, you can imagine that a man who would grow up to be in his 40s, roughly, a royal court painter, had to rub elbows with a lot of extremely annoying people if he had this sort of blue collar attitude about art. Uh, he's sort of the guy who might say like, I just make pictures. You go to if he had a Twitter, it would be uh, just him posting his works, and maybe people being that effusive in their praise over him, or what did he mean by this? Why did he do this? And his answer might just be, well, this is it looks the best this way, so that's why I did it this way. And that's not entirely true of all of his work. Some of it was politically motivated. He would, during his time in the court in Spain, in his late 30s roughly, uh, he became first court painter at 53. So he painted a lot of nobility, and in his depictions of these nobility, it's noted that they're not always entirely flattering. And of course, a man of his skill, that's not an accident. So in his way, he got a little got back at the nobility that by the time the beginning of the 19th century, when he was first court painter, he was first witness on the front lines in some sense, obviously not in a conflict, but of the effects of the Napoleonic Wars and the Peninsular War, which began 1803 and continued on for about 13 years. He saw the nobilities, uh, they were Spanish, but we'll use the word blase attitude, some of them toward war and the effect it had on families like the one he grew up in, the way their lives were treated as a low value currency to spend to gain ground in conflict or to be tossed away. Uh, the way the nobility would speak of these conflicts as some far off thing that were about some principles that were greater than the lives that were being expended to fuel it. A very inefficient burning fuel. And how could a man who grew up lower middle class, the fourth child of six, not become so disillusioned with the nobility of his home country, seeing people like his father and his siblings treated this way, not only by the enemy, the the so-called enemy, right? But the enemy outside his country, but also the enemy within his country. It's really no wonder that eventually he got so fed up that he decided he didn't want to die in the place he was born. A brief biography of his life, I'll say, because the point of this stream isn't to give a biography of Goya necessarily, except to contextualize the works that I want to look at because I like them and because he's an interesting man. And introducing him a bit makes his work all the more interesting. It is depressing. He lived in depressing times, and I think giving that context does enrich our ability to appreciate themes that will be expressed in some of the works that we are going to be looking at, which are not going to be great in number because I don't want this stream to go too long. But there'll be a few selected from different eras of his life. It is depressing. Yeah, that is succinctly excellent way to describe the times that he lived in and the reality of this romantic era context. Why the themes of many European artists around this time turned dark. Yeah, it is. It really is interesting how his upbringing made him see art in this way. I will say this is yeah. On top of the context that was going on, this is not something that is art. So if I put it, how do I put it? This is not art history canon that his upbringing made him see art as a trade and a craft, but this is what I conjecture, reasonable conjecture, I feel, that I am bringing to the conversation given what we do know about him, his attitude toward art and his upbringing. They seem like reasonable dots to connect for me, but I'll just be honest, and that's something that I'm bringing to the conversation and not something that I've picked up. Hmm. Yeah, it is. Yeah, my interpretation based on the context. Well, thank you. Uh, yeah, in a way, because he was so fluent in art, if we consider art to be its own visual language, right? The visual language of art, right? What he expressed in his depictions of nobility, it reads to me not like some highbrow philosophical political take or anything. It reads to me as just him expressing himself in a language that he speaks natively. So art that he creates is like him just talking in a tongue to him that is as native as Spanish. So I feel like it's easy to say, well, he did some risque stuff in these portraits of nobility, which visually I find kind of boring, to be honest. But so we're not really don't go to look at them very much. But it's easy to say that, well, he did this kind of politically motivated stuff. It's like, well, look at the times he was living in, the way he and people like his family were affected, and think about the fact that he had been an artist for, by the time he did those paintings, the better part of 5 decades. That would be like me saying, I wish I didn't have to pay so much taxes. It's just him talking in a language in which he's very fluent. Doesn't have these, doesn't necessarily have these very laden, affected, pretentious attitudes just because he's speaking in art rather than speaking in Spanish. So briefly, his a brief biography, in addition to what I've already spoken of. Uh, so we already said he was born 1746 to lower middle class family, or at least his father was lower middle class craftsman. Middle class. My handwriting sucks, but that's not the point. Lower middle class family, fourth child of six. So his eldest brother, of course, was meant to take after his father. So his eldest brother took over the gilding trade, so overlaying things in gold. He received a free education until age 14, where he studied by copying stamps. This is sort of his art education properly begins with this apprenticeship copying stamps. But he never got along well with his masters, the people he studied under, and I once again I have to think back to the fact that he's kind of like as blue collar as an artist and craftsman can get, right? You know, maybe his father inlaid things in gold, but he did it as a trade, and so his lifelong reputation is being contentious with some of his contemporaries and his masters. Might just be like, to me, might be a difference in personality and attitude coming from the fact that he probably didn't have a lot of patience for, you know, some of the attitudes that are common, that have always been common in artists and the artist class, right? Not being so down to earth in many ways, right? Um, at 18, he was well, 18, kind of an adult, right? Uh, at least 18-year-olds like to think so. He wanted to paint his own things. I want to make my stuff, is basically what he said. So he moved to Madrid from his home village, or where he was near it, studying under this stamp maker. He moved to Madrid, and he studied under a painter that a contemporary, uh, whose name escapes me, but to study under this painter who was somewhat favored by royalty for his under a royal portraitist. But once again, he did not get along well with this master. Reasons that I don't find detailed, at least in the usual places that I look for art history information, and I didn't give myself a lot of time to prep for these streams this week. It's kind of a whim, so maybe I could have found more information, but uh, I'm going to go with my opinion. This is why they didn't get along. He did attempt to, while he was in Madrid, uh, attend the wanted to attend the Royal Academy. Yeah, class difference, basically class difference. Um, he wanted to join the Royal Academy. And he applied in 1763, 1764, 1765, and 1766. And Francisco de Goya was denied entry into the Royal Academy of Arts in Spain. Not its Spanish name, by the way, obviously. Uh, so by this time, he was, so this ages 17, 18, if we're just going by like raw year, 17, 18, 19, 20. So imagine all these years, 4 years, studying under this master that he studied under a master he didn't like. And didn't get along with. He probably learned a lot from him, but doesn't mean he liked him, and doesn't mean he just put up with it. He put up with it for 4 or 5 years. Really did. And probably for longer, right? But for these years, he put up with all that he hated. Not that he was in the right. Maybe he was just being an ornery brat. Who knows? But he put up with this for these years, and 4 years straight, 4 applications, denied, 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 denied. You can imagine the effect this might have on his attitude toward these types of people, at least as far as Spain and Spanish sensibilities. And that, being in this country, this context that he didn't, I can say I think it's just a matter of fact that they didn't appreciate him, considering that he was denied 4 times. He moved, we'll call this a new era, right? A new era of Goya's life in the early 1770s, which means if he was born in 46. Learning art from someone you inherently don't like seems like pulling teeth. I agree. Yeah. As much as I love art, I don't think I would make it in art school. Uh, I took a couple art history classes in university, and that was enough to put me off learning learning art history in university. That shit was boring as hell. Like well, a lot of the things that are more interesting to me, which is like considering Goya's life, the whole Goya is why I circled it. Consider the whole Goya and his work. That isn't necessarily presented in art history in college. Learning from people who don't maybe teach in the way you like, don't look at art in the way that you understand it, is difficult, to say the least. And how many times have you or someone you've known, just said that, well, I had a professor that either helped me learn to love the subject or helped me decide that I hated it. Hear that a lot with math, for example. But for art, it's definitely no less true, especially for people for whom art is a very personal thing. Learning from the wrong person can ruin it for you very deeply. By the time he was approaching his 30s, so by the time he moved to Italy to study art, because it was somewhat fashionable in his era, it was a traditional thing to do. We're going to go to Rome to bathe in the context of the Renaissance, to art. Go to Rome to art was the idea uh, in his era. Uh, but it's not. That's not to say that, and that's a little tongue in cheek, right? But while he was there, he did, of course, absorb uh, the sensibilities of people who loved art for one. Uh, were He was able to visit, see, study, and learn from not only classicists in the sense of like these artists who studied after the tradition of the older masters, right? But he was able to bathe in the context of an art society that interacted directly with classic works that were masterful in their craft, which is, I am going with the narrative that something that Goya valued very highly. So they were masterful both in their craft and in their expression. And a definition of art that I really like, quick aside, is very, very succinct. Art is the marriage of craft and, we'll do a little heart, craft and intention. And these are the two uh, dials that you crank up to make even to crank up your final product of art. So art and craft love each other very much. Hopefully, ideally they do. Sometimes they don't, and that's fine. And when they love each other very much, they give birth to art. Sometimes the intention is so potent that you don't even really need, like, craft can be kind of ugly, but if the intention is powerful enough, you can create something incredible. Also, if someone really doesn't give a shit about art, capital A art, but they're real good at making things pretty, they're still gonna make something beautiful down here. And I think in contexts like Goya, for example, we have he had a lot of craft, and in his later works, his last works, really last notable works that people love very much, the black paintings. He had a lifetime of experience and was in a time in his life where he was feeling very deeply. So, despite his more craftsmanlike attitude towards art, his what he had gone through and what he was going through in his life created a glut of intention that fed into his uh, black paintings era, which again were like toward the end of his life. And despite the apparent lack of craft that we'll see in some of his later works, especially his most beloved works, he was so good at what he did that he didn't. It's not about rendering realistic skin. It's about depicting precisely what he wanted to. And so these works laden with intention, with apparently not so much craft, but informed by a master's craft, created these works that were uh, tipping the scale into timelessness. Uh, exactly, exactly. But the technique and the ability to depict expression was so finely honed that it was instinctually present, even if he wasn't, even if he wasn't detailing the superorbital ridge on Cronus or whatever. Wish more artists had that definition of art and kept an open mind. Things can be good if they're craft heavy or more intention heavy. Exactly, exactly. Innate because he had treated it as a craft. Yeah, yeah. Um, and I will definitely touch on that more when we get to that art because this was or get to that um era or and those works because this was an aside because I was just talking about uh art, right? uh, and a definition of art that I favor uh because it's mine. Wish more artists had that definition of art and kept an open mind that things can be good if they're craft heavy or more attention heavy. I agree. I agree. Um, I agree that it is not as common an attitude as uh, I wish it were because it's broad and inclusive, but not in a paternalistic way. It's broad and inclusive because the range of works that affect people deeply is broad and includes many different uh, many different balances of both across the ages. And I even love to use the example of fucking like rage comics. Rage comics are uh, pure intention, extremely powerful intention. Craft, I don't know. Some of them are extremely amateurish. I mean, some of them are actually also made by people who were very skilled, or at least a lot more skilled than you'd think, seeing those comics, right? But it's not evident uh, in the work that they produce that they had the craft, but the intention is so powerful in rage comics, memes, fucking Wojaks, right? That uh, I will freely consider those works of art. They fit this definition. So yes, they do count as art, right? And they they evoke almost perfectly the the meanings or the messages that they wish to. And so I would say that unfortunately for a lot of people's sensibilities, especially those who identify uh, very highly uh, as artists, unfortunately for this sort of type of person, I suppose, just whose identity as a capital A artist uh, involves being having very specific definitions of what counts or doesn't count as art. Um, yes, rage comics would count as art in this definition, and it would be very very successful art because this aspect is so powerfully executed. Um, and yeah, unfortunately, that means that people who heavily favor craft and identify deeply with um, the efforts that they had put in to develop their craft, yeah, you do stand on par with them. I mean, execute something that uh, combines both of these into an effective total product, and you'll stand up there with these giants who created these rage comics. But anyway, uh, an aside because I do also have strong opinions about what is and isn't art, and I could go on for a while, but this is supposed to be about Goya, and this was his journey to Rome to become an artist. It would be in spirit akin to, I don't know, traveling to like France or something, for us. This was his. This is what people did. And while he was there, he did study art. He did study. He did improve his craft while he was there, and he absorbed classical influence, uh, and sensibility. Because if you really don't care about that sort of thing in art, it is very hard to create something that is, uh, how do I put it? Something that isn't inert. Because, I mean, how, I want to put it politely, but there's this soul versus soulless, right? You don't create works like Goya created, that are soulless. And intention, we can say, informs the soul of a work. And his most powerful works, um, are soul with a V, very, very powerful. So while he was in Rome, he developed in this way until this man who had been rejected from the Royal Academy in his younger years. Keep in mind that the time frame we're talking about, he had gone from being like a 17-year-old to being in his early 30s, right? So this is uh, a lot of time to grow, and he did. Is the important thing. He did grow in this time. He went from a kid who was rejected from the Royal Academy in Madrid to someone who was able to win second place in uh, a painting contest in in an Italian city. Yeah, let's go Goya. That's right. Exactly, exactly, exactly. Let's go Goya. Um, and again, he's in this context that Rome, Italy, is where people went to become artists with a capital A, and he went from art school reject to winning art competitions, placing in art competitions. I consider second place winning, uh, in this context. Uh, when he was competing with people was who had, like him, gone on pilgrimages for the sake of becoming better artists. He was able to rank among them as as an adult, right? Pretty awesome. Let's go Goya. That's what we like to hear. Exactly, exactly. Clap. Thank you for telling me. Also, Adon, I don't know if I said hi, but I freaking love art, and I love seeing you and anyone else here. Thank you so much. Um, and this is his Rome era. But following his Rome era, in uh, we'll say his late 30s, right? In his late 30s is where we're going. You wanted to be an artist once? It's never too late to start. It's never too late to start, man. If you want tutorials on anything, I'm not a great artist, but let me know. Let me know what you want to learn, and I'll try to help you learn it. I didn't draw really until I was well past the age. People say don't bother, you'll never get better. You'll never learn. I really properly started studying, like really wanting to learn to draw when I was um when I was 30. It's basically when I started learning to draw. Uh, yeah, I started learning really when I was 30. Uh, well, like 29 maybe. Will not be. I'm not trying to like hype myself up, but like this is when I started. And if you really want to get better, you can get better. I'm 32 now, and I have gotten better. I will say, uh, significantly better from someone who struggled to draw these simple cartoons in simple stuff in Fun with a Pencil, which is a very famous beginner's book. I struggled drawing the very simple heads, the cartoon heads, to drawing. I don't know if you want to look on Twitter, my profile picture. Uh, the that like painting is improvement. You know, there's always that. I I'm not gonna speak badly on the things that I make because some of my friends are here and they'll get mad at me. But you know, I don't consider myself super proficient, but it's always possible to get better. It's always possible to learn. Uh, don't say that, you know, don't think that learning to draw, paint, whatever is out of the question for you. Hmm. Um, I'm very passionate about that as well. So I had to take that aside. Soul and intent. Thank you, Adele. Um, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Let's see. We were going to talk about Goya's uh return to Spain era, which was in his late 30s. His return to Spain era. And yeah, that being said, Prince Anime, if there's any topic in art that you want to learn about, um, for reasons I won't get into uh right now, because again, this is supposed to be about Goya. I believed not only that I couldn't learn to draw, but that I shouldn't learn to draw until I was again 29. And I said, "Fuck it! I've wanted to do this forever. Let me just do it." Um, anything you want to learn, any topic in art you want me to cover, do a tutorial on, find someone who can do a tutorial on. If I can do it myself, I'll do it. Uh, send me a DM on Twitter. Add me on Discord. Uh, my Discord is the same as this uh, channel name, and I'll do it. Yeah, no problem. I it matters to me, so hit me up. Uh, if you still want to, if you just don't really want to, it's fine. That there's nothing wrong with like I used to want to be an artist, but now I'm just not interested. That's fine. That's completely fine. But I used to want to be an artist in the past tense because you don't think it's possible for you. No, you don't have to accept that. Neither do I. Return to Spain era. So in his late 30s, this would have been like so the uh, another aside. I really dislike that in art history, what they would no one would have said late 30s. They would have said in the years 1779 to 1784. This would be his return to Spain era. It's like what the fuck does this mean? No, 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 no. We'll say he was in his late 30s. This gives you a portrait. This gives you the connotation of a man who has lived some life, done some shit, seen some shit. Uh, in his late 30s, he returned to Spain. He designed cartoons. Um, and when I say he designed cartoons, he wasn't doing Steven Universe or Gravity Falls, uh, Rebecca Sugar illustrations. He was this would have been cartoons in the sense of preparatory paintings. Preparatory paintings for tapestry. Preparatory paintings for royal tapestries. So these would have been like depictions of scenes like that were going to be taken by other artists and uh, turned into a royal tapestry. Is this so? So when I say he was designing cartoons in like I don't know, um, the in his late 30s, that's what he was doing. He was doing preparatory paintings for royal tapestries. Um, yeah, the Cowlight Rejectee. Uh, yeah, whatever. Uh, Clowning on the Royal Academy art cell. Oh my God, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so funny. Yeah, like they like the difference in the values that they favor is just so like it's so passe. It's like the bean mouth of the late 18th century. Uh, this by the way, uh, the Napoleonic Wars. The Napoleonic Wars began in like the in 1803. So it would have been some time before they started, but the writing was on the wall, right? Like this wars aren't born out of nowhere. So during this time, it would have been some unpleasant stirrings, I'd say, uh, toward the around the beginning of his Royal Academy era. The bean mouth of the late 18th century is a quote of all time. Thank you. Uh, I'm going to say thank you because I'm going to take that as a compliment. Um, he was painting Spanish nobility and such uh, at age 53. Uh, at age 53, he became the first court painter. First court painter, which is like if there's a lot of court painters, court painters maybe like uh, I don't know, just people who painted Spanish nobility would have been court painters, right? So if there were how many dozens? No, maybe we'll say if there were 20, hypothetically, then he would be number one, considered number one. He would have been the favorite one, basically. He was the first court painter at age 53, um, and he would live a few more decades. But as far as aspirations for a lower middle class fourth child of six, this is a pretty good place to get to in your career. I'm going to rewind a little bit. Um, so that happened again when he was age 53, but before that, we'll rewind just a little bit to 1793 when he would have been age 47. This is when he fell very ill. He felt very ill, and um, it fucked him up bad. We'll say. This is when his art started to turn to darker themes. This is where I think we can start to see him. I hesitate to say descending, but becoming the man who could create Saturn, uh, devouring, and so on and so on. Because before this, as you'll see, he was not that guy. But this is a point in his life people often point to where like he got really sick, it fucked him up. The wars would begin in like 1803. He'd been living amongst nobility. Uh, for some time, getting real tired of him. All of this affected him more and more, and you can see that the tone and themes and uh, coloring, everything about his art turned to so-called darker themes around when he was age 47, which would have been 47, 48 in 1793. Yeah, it is easier to. I'm glad you agree that it's easier to think about it in the context of age, and the fact that I don't know, convention is silly. If it doesn't work for getting people to give a shit about art history, why do we still why would you have been taught? Oh, actually, in 1793, he fell ill. Like, well, he was 47. He got real sick. He got fucked up. He still continued to improve, and he became the first court painter, right? At um at 53, but at 47 he was starting to be real over it. Also, uh, he continued being an artist, of course, into the into the 19th century. In 1803, these wars began. So the uh, the Napoleonic Wars were raging nearby, and the Peninsular War is the one specifically. I keep mentioning the Napoleonic Wars just because people might know about when they happened, but for Spain, the Peninsular War is the one uh, that would have deeply affected directly maybe Goya. So much so that he did a print series called the I started writing atrocities just because it's a great word, but it was called Disasters of War. And so for someone who lived amongst the nobility, the people who not that everyone, of course, would have been on board with going to war, but amidst the people who were responsible for the decisions to go to war, amidst the people who uh, profited, as people always profit from war, and it's always people who are uh, on the upper crust of society. Not that this is what the war was about, of course. I'm not making any political history claims uh, while I'm here, but people who might have been insulated um, from some of the consequences of war, and who were, of course, responsible for the decisions to go to war and the um, ennobling of war. He decided to do this print series called "The Disasters of War." So this is at the beginning of the presentation. I talked about the political aspect of his work. Uh, People might say like, oh, the atrocities committed in wartime. Everyone is aghast at those. Everyone hates that, of course, or they say they do. But this is like uh, a very important person, the first court painter, uh, doing a print series on the disasters of war that includes not only French atrocities but also atrocities committed by Spanish forces. Uh, you can't say that this man did not have and express political opinions in his work. That someone might say, well, Saturn devouring his son is the work everyone cares about, and how is that political? It was a product of a lifetime of political art of the at the highest level. The disasters of war um, um, they came in the we'll just pick out one. We'll say 3rd of May 1808, right? This would have been like in the thick of it, because this Peninsular War went from 1808 to 1814, right? So this would have been like depicting something that happened in the middle of this war. and this is just an example of one of the works from the Disasters of War. But all this talk about his work, and I'm not showing it, and that's a little rough, but we'll get there. And I'll come back to these times and events, reference back to them when we are looking at the art itself. We'll say the last arc of Goya's life, is this uh, well, not the last arc. We'll say the penultimate arc of his life. We'll say is the House of the Deaf Guy, uh, or Black Paintings era, which was when he would have been born 46. These were 18, 19 to 22. So he would have been what, 60, 66, 66 to um 18, 19. Sorry, 18, 19. Okay. So he would have been actually 73 to 76 when he created these works that include a couple of my favorites of Goya's works, which are this includes, of course, Saturn devouring his sun, or what people have taken to calling that, and Atropos, Atropos, or the Fates, which is another of my favorites from this era. And these again, these something raw as fuck about these is that they were never meant for public consumption. They were rough paintings that he did on um, the walls of his house that he was living in at the time, which was called the House of the Deaf Guy. This was the last place he lived in Spain. The last place he lived in Spain before he moved to Bordeaux in France. It is it's I believe it's a matter of record, even though because he was a very politically aware man, Goya kind of was tight-lipped about some of his opinions and his leanings, um, because he wanted to get away with the stuff the politically motivated art that he was creating. He was kind of tight-lipped about all that stuff, and he in his lifetime suppressed a lot of his work that was created in the later part of his life, uh, because it would have pissed off a lot of powerful people that he was close to and might have depended on for income to live, right? Although by this time he was, very well off and he was fine, right? But in these later arcs of his life, he was deaf. Had been ill. His uh, wife, he had was no longer with him. Um, he was cared for by someone else during his House of the Deaf Guy arc. Uh, yeah, he was a man who had gone through it. That's basically what I'm saying. And finally, he got fed up enough of that in 1824 when he was 78. He was like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm not dying in Spain. I don't like this country. I don't like the people, the political climate. I don't like it here. He moved to Bordeaux in France. He kept drawing while he was in Bordeaux, but no noteworthy works or no works that are considered noteworthy come to mind from this era. Although he was still drawing and probably producing incredible works, uh, he worked to suppress them in his lifetime. He didn't care to be renowned for his works. It was just, again, art was a language he had spoken since he was a child. Uh, One of his native tongues, we'll say, that he'd spoken since he was a child. So by the time he was fed up enough with with Spain to move to France. He had been speaking this language for, you know, we'll say it at 14. By this time, he had been speaking this language for 64 years. So of course he would continue to draw and produce incredible drawings and works until his death. But that doesn't mean really uh, that he would want them to be seen. Uh, he would want them to represent things that he wanted to share with the public. He just drew because, to some degree, uh, it was what he did. What he did was draw. What he did was produce and create art. But there he would die in 1828 at age uh, 82. So he died at age 82 after a very uh, a life that like many great artists uh, paints quite the narrative. You take the events, present them in their context, and his life was quite a story. It does well, yeah. It's also so funny, like Goya being cited as one of the old masters. Uh, some of the people who like worship the so-called canon of old masters and so on, they would not fuck with um, an old man uh, throwing paint on the walls of his house in an expressive way. But the people who lived in these times and created these works, Goya, in his way, right, in the black paintings era, and artists like Caravaggio, one of my favorites, of course, who was he would not have fucked with people who worship him and in the upper crests of the so-called art community, right? He would have dueled them because they're fucking pretentious assholes. Uh, the people who created these works and the people who worship these works, different types of people. And I just find that interesting. Um, yeah, I just find that interesting. That the type of person who can produce in the ways that some of these men did, live in the way that they did. Um, People who can live like that aren't the type of people who worship them and have a extremely rigid idea of what doesn't constitute art, what is or isn't valuable in art. So, having presented his life, right, and told his story to some degree, uh, I it wasn't comprehensive because uh, the point isn't to present a comprehensive biography, it's to tell the story of his life. Having done that, something people often say about Goya is that he's the last of the old masters. Not a term, by the way, old masters, not a term that is really used much in art history, just because it's kind of fuzzy. Uh, but something that people love to do is argue about uh, when, like, what is an old master? Who counts as an old master? Um, it's not interesting to me. I don't care that much. I just think it's a really fucking cool title for an artist to have, and he earned it, and so I'm gonna call him that. Uh, but what might constitute an old master? You learned about the old master stuff when you were in college. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I believe that. I believe that. Um, but yeah, people fucking love talking about who counts, who doesn't count. Uh, Something that really annoying art students like to do is go like, who cares? Their art is so boring. Why do they even count as old masters? Dude, come on, sit down. Uh, Not the point. Uh, So there are a couple definitions of what counts as an old master, and I'll just present them because um, he has this title, and it's a really cool title. But it includes this phrase, uh, and I want to explain what that means. Raise his eyebrow. uh, yeah. So, what might an old master be? Old master, uh, in theory, it might be someone who was literally a proficient artist who literally, of course, had held the master title at a guild. So this definition is pretty clean, pretty objective. I kind of like it. It doesn't have a lot of the the romantic, well, romantic. Speaking art history, of course, romantic. There's it. This means a lot more than just like fanciful or uh, emotionally laden. But it's a lot less romantic than what you might think of this. But I think a decent definition of what an old master might be. It includes a lot of people that you you know people that are really into art probably don't care about, but they would still count by this definition. Um, but it's also one of those words that has a more colloquial usage, and even among people who are very educated, there are colloquialisms. There are words that are used a certain way just because everyone uses them that way. And old master is one of those words. So they would be uh, any prominent artists before maybe before the 19th century. Before the 19th century. Before the modernists. Uh, the modernists, notably, we'll say Van Gogh. Artists that were like post-impressionists, artists like Van Gogh, right? So prominent artists before artists like Van Gogh might be considered old masters. That's what we'll say. Um, One thing I think that people do agree on is that even if they don't agree that Goya is the last of the old masters, even if they don't agree that this he deserves this title, uh, it would be one of his contemporaries. People will generally agree that um, the old masters end with the romantics the romantics. If you like art, you might know. Maybe you like art, but you don't like art history, which completely valid. I fucking hate the way art history is taught. Um, so one reason one reason I want to do streams like this. Um, if you're not clear on like eras of stuff, this would include people like Constable, Caspar David Friedrich, uh, who I think if you don't know specifically who he is, he did the one Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog, where the dude's standing like this, and he's got his like stick or staff or whatever, standing like this, and then there's like the whole landscape beneath him. That was Friedrich. He was a German romanticist, you might say, uh, which is an oxymoron, but nonetheless, he existed, and so does his work. Uh, Friedrich, Blake, Edward Blake, I believe, and Goya. Um, this is not the canon of romantics, but these are some notable ones. If you've had an art education, if you like looking at art, at the very least, you'll probably recognize um, Friedrich's Wanderer Above the Sea Fog. Those guys were prominent in the Romantic era, and the Romantic era would have been the last set of people that would be considered old masters. Goya was contemporaries with these people, so others might argue, if they died later, I guess, or whatever, that he was the last of them. But I think Goya, one reason Goya deserves this title is because of works like Saturn Devouring the Sun, where he really left this like representational realism. Um, it informed the craft of his work, but the intention took center stage, which is what Impressionism is really like all about. And post-Impressionism and modernism is about favoring the intention over the craft. Is a succinct and maybe very contentious argument that I'll make, but um, whatever. It's my place to make it. Makes you want to dig up your art history textbooks so bad. Uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I also just talking about this, giving a brief overview makes me want to dig out some art history textbooks. I I picked up a couple thrifting. Well, another reason I love thrifting is you can find like books that like some of these art history or like art books that are like $80, 120. You find them for like $3. You donated yours. That's fair. That is a good and decent thing to do. Okay. Uh, I am now. The last thing I want to do in the talking portion without looking at Goya's work, um, we'll talk about the eras of his art. So some of the themes, not in the like, not like the message of his work, but just visual patterns or things he represented the tone of his works. This is what I mean by themes. We have the like uh, portraiture era, which also he did like buildings, architectural drawings. This would have been like early in his career and stuff like that. The like anti-war, anti-war or uh, depicting war, which he did with the Disasters of War series. There is the war, and then human suffering. Human suffering, we'll say, was a definitely a theme of his work. Human suffering, sure, sure, sure. And then finally, when we get to uh, about this time, um, or early 70s, because by this time he was in France, right? But maybe more like 76, 70, whatever. When he was living in the house of the deaf guy, he would have depicted some of the supernatural supernatural uh, drawings, and not in like a religious context, but in a like a mythical and dark context. And uh, you could definitely say his work veers into the grotesque. Uh, the themes of his work veer into the grotesque. The visual theming of his work, the way he depicts people, um, favors the uncanny and the grotesque in his later works in the black paintings era, for which he is most famous. And this is, of course, what drew me to Goya, as it draws most people who are interested in Goya. As a romanticist, a romanticist who did portraiture, even a romanticist who did anti-war or depicted human suffering, um, he was always, in all contexts, a master of his craft. But across the span of history, not so interesting. But we get a man who has lived a full life, uh, or a man who is not afraid to depict uh, what is supernatural and grotesque as a way of embodying what he is dealing with internally, what he has dealt with. A man who is on the edge of, who can feel himself being at the end of his life, is when I think he created his most interesting work, if not his most, even if it wasn't his most, um, obviously, technically impressive work. If we look at him as a romanticist who does all this stuff, uh, relative to all the artists ever across history, not that interesting, honestly. All credit to him as a man, but this was not that interesting until we got here. And I think it is fair to say that uh, from a historical perspective, that this is what sets him apart. And why people give a shit about him at all is because this era, these themes, when he was, you know, not afraid to express these are the themes that are celebrated in his work. The supernatural and grotesque era. I'm going to take a little break of just a couple minutes to drink some water and take a little stretch break. We'll be back in 5 minutes or less to actually look at Goya's work. So I'll just write it on here instead of going to the BRB screen. Say BRB. Uh, Water, stretch, etc. We'll back at BRB at we'll say what, like 55. And whatever your local time zone is, this 5 minutes before the hour is when I'll be back to talk about and examine the visual works that we're going to be looking at, which is going to include Saturn. It's going to include Atropos. It's going to include Courtyard with Lunatics and Parasol, and maybe one more, because this is not comprehensive in any way. But this is a little selection, a sampling that will fit the narrative that I feel like telling. But no, it's a selection of works from different eras of his life, and then in addition to the most famous one, I wanted to pick out the one that I like the most from the same era as his most famous one. So those are the works we're going to be looking at starting at about 5 minutes before the hour. I'll be right back. Please also for yourselves, posture check first of all, and then get some water, have a stretch, whatever, etc. You need to do. Be right back. Hi, it's me. I'm back, and it's time. It's time. It's time to look at a selection of Goya's works that I've done. I'm done vandalizing, graffitiing this poor old man, uh, and showing off art that isn't even Goya's work. Uh, whoops. Yeah, no. But I think this is a great portrait. It really it fits the vibe. Um, the it is a portrait that suits, I think, the man, um, as he was during the era in which he produced uh, the art for which he is most well known. The works that I selected, I think I'll show them in chronological order. I'll do that. So okay, we have. I wasn't sure about picking something from his earliest era because specifically because the work that uh, is most interesting or noteworthy produced by Goya is work that was produced when he was closer. He was more of a senior. But I think I will briefly show one of his earlier ones before I get into the one that I specifically chose. I'll quickly grab something from his earlier days. Uh, let's see. Maybe maybe we'll pick this one. Okay. Uh, we'll make a new work from the clipboard. Uh, no, that's too lazy. I'll load it up. I'll load it up properly. Goya deserves that. This is going to be the earliest work that I'll show, which was done in 1774. 1774 would have been his return to Spain era. And it is a depiction of a sort of very classical uh, in some sense in its use of color and in its composition, in the sense that it is you know not the most not a ton of depth. Uh, the title of this piece means like hunt with a decoy, right? So like a little hunting dog scene, a scene that is in this time, uh, when this was done, 1774, he would have been uh, uh, he would have been in Rome, right? So this would have been during his. Uh, I said it was his return to Spain era, but this is actually his his studying in Rome arc. Studying in Rome arc. We'll do this. Hold on. Layer border effect. Okay, so this would have been his studying in Rome arc. So this is his training arc. Uh, is when he produced this work. And you can see that there is some element of the there's a lot of mastery here in each individual. Yeah, in each individual piece. There's like these birds are beautiful. This dog, gorgeous, of course. This dog is gorgeous. We look closely, you can see how the fur is rendered. with these individual wispy brush strokes is is fantastic. The transitions, the texture of the work, uh, the transitions, from light to darks, uh, in these small details, these very small details, are very impressive. Um, these tiny, uh, they're not even brush strokes, right? They're droplets of paint that create depth in the the hunting dog's eye that depicts a bit of wetness on the nose. He has a little bit of an expression. He's a determined little guy uh, on the hunt, right? So up in these details, the paws, the anatomy of the dog um, is very solid as well. Of course, a lot of artists, don't favor studying animal anatomy. Yeah, yeah, the physicality of old art is so nice. I um visited I visited a local museum, I'll say, somewhat recently, and that was exactly my experience. Is like getting up close to see like the texture of like and imagining, what kind of brush did he use? Like was it like a single hair brush or to create these textures? One stroke of a very specific shade uh, of white, or this like brown tinted white, or get into the specific terminology some other time, but yeah, specific brush with this very specific uh, hue and value, deliberately chosen to depict the hairs on this little dog in this painting. This just this whole painting, right? We went down and we saw hairs, individual hairs, being rendered on this dog. Uh, and that is it also is, yeah, it is very interesting and just cool to look at art, physical art, uh, especially that created in you know oil paintings or any material, right? Just seeing the weathering over time it adds such uh, it adds a richness to it, to the work, that I find very fascinating, and I think you do as well, and many people do. Um, another interesting to note about that is that uh, the weathering adds a lot of depth, emotional depth. It adds emotional depth to the experience of the work, to our experience of the work, that is absolutely not present. That is not at all present in the work itself. If we look at like this navigator window, when you can't see the texture, or the weathering of the work, uh, there's much less emotional depth to our experience of the work, I think. Um, it's the brightness of the scene, of the colors, the saturation of the no the overall it's not like a supernaturally saturated work. These are all rather realistic choices in color and tone. Uh, Color, shade, tone, tint, value, whatever words we want to use. They're very realistic, very believable. But there is still a richness, a natural richness to the work. Um, for sure, in the colors chosen. But the weathering adds a, a veneer of nostalgia over the top. Uh, it adds a veneer of nostalgia, of the passage of time, of it makes it into an artifact, which is funny because the patterns created by weathering, we'll see like down here, flaking of paint, fading of certain areas. Um, I say that like the passage of time makes this physical work into an artifact, But the way that it does so is by introducing for digital works we might call it like artifacting, right? When you get a bunch of like random bits that don't quite belong in the work, or like the recreation of a visual digitally, we would call that artifacting. And I think that's funny that how that parallels what the passage of time does to work. It gives context at the time. Whether it gives context at the time and situations around the art. Yeah, that's true. That's true. The weathering in this particular piece from 1774 uh, was like 30 years before the wars that would really create the Goya that created the more prominent works. But you can see while he was studying in Rome, learning honing his craft, he was like 28. He was 28 when he made this, I believe. Uh, if he was born in 46, this was created in 1774, 1775. I'll say. He would have been roughly 28. Uh, and yeah, so I began by saying like you can see there is a lot of mastery in his depictions of these different animals. It's gorgeous, gorgeous economy of his brushwork in some places where it's like, uh, you know, uh, one one drop of paint for the shine in that reflection in the dog's eye. These very somewhat simple strokes can be picked up in some of these places, but still very just great depiction of each individual element. This owl's expression, it makes me laugh because yeah, owls do just look like that, but this one in particular is just like someone's got him fucked up. Um, all these individual elements look great, but the way that they harmonize uh, in the composition is uh, a lot more flat. It's even in its distribution of detail, right? There is of course this triangular, this encapsulation created by the netting, right? And the this shape down here that extends into the foreground, um, which implies some depth. But the way that in my opinion, the way that the details distributed across the work makes it so that you kind of just see this whole shape. Um, and unless you deliberately and like specifically go into it and in like look at what you want to look at, the work tells you to look here, and that's about all it does. The range of values, um, you know, is it's not. I'm not saying it's amateurish. Like he's a very proficient painter. By this time, of course, but the arcs are kind of again evenly distributed. The middle value range, evenly distributed, and the contrast of hues of like actual color is it's somewhat flat. So it's not as interesting to look at as some of his later works. Again, he was 28 when he did this, and his most well-regarded, and interesting, and awesome works were made when he was like in his 70s, or at the very least like uh, we'll say like in his 40s. So there's a lot of development between this and the works that I find more interesting personally, um, and the works that would make him a first court painter, right? Uh, so I do. I wasn't originally going to show this one because again, it's just not super interesting. Even if it's, we can look and see like, wow, that was really cool. That was really cool. It's not the most interesting work. I'm glad that we're gonna look at this because again, this is 17, yeah, 74, when he would have been 28. But the next work that we look at, uh, chronologically, uh, would have been, let's see, the parasol. Parasol, which is a work that he did when he was doing cartoons, right? So this would have been in 30. Yeah, this would have been just uh, well before he was first court painter. You can see the works that the type of work that he was doing uh, as he moved toward that life. Uh, let's just take a second to look to take it in to look at this work, The Parasol by Goya. If you should like to, this is a cartoon that would have eventually been made into a tapestry. Uh, a scene of daily life. A scene of daily life that would have been made into part of a tapestry for the royal palace in Madrid. It is very expressive. You can see in his development from his Rome era to his uh, cartoon era uh, how he's grown. The the flatness of hue and value here in 3 years uh, is he has developed much more. It's brightness here, contrasting with just a different uh, the difference in value alone, right? You can see it just is so much more visually interesting than what we looked at um, the uh, the house with the hunter, right? Uh, and yes, the design of the dress, the design of the dress, as in the costuming, but the design of this dress specifically, uh, is it's powerful. The it's like bright blues into these like dark navy tones. So interesting, so cool. And the like the drapery, which is very simple. It's very simple. Uh, relative to uh classical what you would consider like old master drapery. Simple, simply rendered, but it has such a sense of motion and expression. It is cascading. Cascading is maybe an overused word, but look at it. The way that it folds down upon itself. It flows a river of fabric down here, and the 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 titular parasol, yeah, being held over being held over the woman's face. This young man shading this noble woman, giving her the noble treatment. Right. It's something interesting about this painting is that Goya was in Spain, presumably drawing Spanish people, but this is not a Spanish dress. This is French fashion. This is French fashion of the time. Uh, and like she's kind of smug, isn't she? Isn't she? She says, she's like, I know I'm pretty. I know I'm dressed in the latest French fashion, and I got this, and I got a cute boy holding a parasol over me, and she's got this attitude about her that is so expressive, and it's in her pose too. This way that her fan is just like it's not being held tight, loosely held in her right hand. Uh, you know, she's not worried about losing her grip on that, and she probably doesn't even need it right now. It's just an accessory holding on to it, and she has this it's like shawl draped over the dress, layering, so important in fashion. Uh, this ribbon is rendered in a way that is because this is a cartoon. You wouldn't expect everything to be rendered in the most exquisite detail that he could, because it was meant to be turned into a tapestry. But even so, even if this is quote unquote just a cartoon, uh, the way that it almost has an impressionist feel about it, doesn't it? Um, but the way that these everything is rendered is to indicate where what is going to be what is important for the tapestry. But the depth of the composition also so important, so important. These like darks up here, well, a little more detail on the front, and then it fades into grays and lighter tones in the back. Darkness framing the couple. Not only the shadows in the foreground and the environment that's around them, but the shadows on the figures themselves are very important for creating this feeling of what is interesting, of being our attention being drawn to what is important for Goya here uh, in this cartoon to be made into a tapestry. And then we have these smaller contrast and value, smaller sections where we have contrast and value. Here makes us want to look at his face. Uh, her arm is kind of in shadow as well, but the fashion was clearly important to Goya too, because we have these contrast and value here that bring us up here. But it doesn't bring us all the way to her face. I find that interesting. She has this kind of there is this bounce light here, right? That creates some interest. That brings us up to her face, but it's not a stark contrast of her going into the light the way that we have the youth the cute boy's face in contrast, right? Or like directly contrasting. He is shading her, and you have to take a little bit of effort to look at her. Uh, the value range on her face is not so stark that it demands your attention, but you want to see what's going on with her, don't you? You're going to look. You're going to follow this bright contrast up this gradation in value up to her face. And when you do, she caught you looking. Isn't that fun? uh, I love that actually. There is also this little sparkling earring that has some of that effect too. You're going to follow this flow up there. See of this the drapery of her dress. You're going to follow the values. You're going to follow the flowing of it. The way these run down. If they run down, they also run up, right? And this contrast here, interesting. These values are. It doesn't. It leads the lie around it wonderfully. These very harmonious values here. You could have this big splotch of green when there's no green in any of this. No green here. Um, but because the values are nice and harmonious, they'll lead you from this section here, where the dark background contrasts with the highlighted parasol. You'll follow this pattern of uh, turning a border effect back on. Right? You'll follow this pattern of dark. You'll chase this down the wall if that's where your eye starts, right? To this contrast. You'll go dark, light, dark, and then light on the tip of the parasol to dark. Follow these spines of the parasol down, and she caught you looking again. The youth's oh, this is very interesting. Let's follow the line of this youth's arm. Oh, she caught you looking again. Ain't that something? That's just really cool. I really like that. Um, but we see here, this is still not the Goya. This is still not the Goya. Um, that is him at his most interesting. This is craft. This is masterful craft. Um, with intention, of course. But what is the depth of this work? Eh, it's 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 a cute scene. It's a cute scene of everyday life that's going to be turned into a tapestry. Um, it's not personal. And if I weren't specifically, in here, maybe telling the story of like, oh, she got you looking. You go this way, there she is. You go this way, there she is. You go this way, bounce over here, there she is. If I wasn't telling the story, I don't think, um, unless you were like walking around a museum and this work happened to be here, you wouldn't really care about it. Um, Even though there is depth to Plum here, there's a story to tell. Um, by itself, in itself, it's really not that interesting, and you're not wrong to think so because there are dozens of paintings like this, hundreds even, uh, some of them better, some of them worse, um, that are just as masterfully crafted. That you could construct this kind of narrative of like, tee, I knew we were gonna look. I know I look good. I know I look good in my French fashion, even though we're living in Spain. But look what I got. You know how expensive this shit was. You better be looking. Uh, you could tell stories like this about so many works, from other works by Goya, by his contemporaries, by his competitors. Um, it's not. This is a the work of a master. This is not necessarily the work of a legend. Uh, but we are still in 1777. Uh, he is 31 here, 31 when he creates this. So he is an adult. He is a professional, and the work is uh, proficient, but is not personal, which means it's less interesting for many people, myself included. It's very fun to look at, to tell these stories that you can find in the piece with the composition and the everything technically about it. It's fun to tell those stories, but as a piece in itself, it's not so interesting yet. But Goya was someone who grew as an artist uh, over the course of his 80 years of life, roughly. Uh, he continued to grow for about 50 years after this work was created. So, no shade to Goya, but it's this is still uh, impersonal. It was created it was created to be made into a tapestry, not as a final product in itself. So it's still kind of we're not at the interesting part yet. Uh, we're not at the climax of the story yet. But after the parasol, um, by chronologically, following chronologically, we went from uh, the House with the Hunter in 1774 to the parasol in 1777. The next one we'll look at is going to be the last one before we get to his. So it's going to be pre-Black period. which is my favorite Goya before we get to his House of the Deaf Guy era. We're going to go to 1794. So it is a bit of a time jump. We're going from he's 31 here to he is in his late 50s. This is like, so he has already he's been a court painter. And I'll take this and bring it with us over to Courtyard with Lunatics. Now this is my fucking shit. Look at this painting. Just take it in. This is Courtyard with Lunatics by Goya. 1794, he is 58. The last one, he was 31. And I really just want to, like, take this in. Moving closer. Yeah. So eerie. So interesting. Interesting to look at. Interesting in its subject matter. The depth. It's visceral. And so just, it's so fascinating a piece. Uh, that I just want to shut up a little bit and let it breathe. There's a lot that makes this painting more interesting. So this was uh he's no longer interested in painting nobility. So he by this point he had been painting nobility and doing a really nice good job at it for a long time. He had been painting royalty, portraits, architecture, all that stuff, we mentioned earlier. But this work in 1794, uh, so here he is. Wait, he was 46. I misspoke earlier. He was born in 46, right? So he was not 50 something here. He was when he created this work, he was 48. So he had my fault for that. He was 48 when he created this work. So he was not yet the first court painter. Not first court painter. My apologies for misspeaking. That would happen 5 years later. He is a mature man. He had been through some shit. Right? He had the midpoint of his career. This is another reason this work is interesting in particular. It's a cabinet painting. Cabinet painting, so called. So it was small. It was small. It was a little guy. Uh, 12 inches across. 12.9 inches. By 17.2 inches. That's incredible. Capturing this much. Think of how big a ruler is. The width of this painting is the width of a ruler. It's tall. It's almost 1.5 rulers tall. And what he was able to capture here is just incredible. You can see how much he's matured as an artist, or as a craftsman, we'll say, uh, between uh, 20 years ago, 17 years ago to now. He's not depicting royalty here. It is, yeah. The lighting is incredible. It is eerie. It is ethereal. Um, it is uncanny, otherworldly. And it Mos Eisley. I'm interested in why you say Mos Eisley. Um, that's I am not so much of a Star Wars guy. Um, uh, so I don't really I wouldn't get that exactly what you meant by that. Or I couldn't draw conclusions for myself. If you want to explain, please. Like that's interesting. I would never use that analogy because I'm not a Star Wars guy. But instead of nobility, royalty, here uh, he is painting a scene from an asylum, right? Uh, that he saw when he was a kid, when he was a he's remembering a scene that he saw uh, from from his younger days, right? This is one of the first uh, what was the word? Expeditions into more fantastical, fantasized depictions of reality or supernatural, veering into the grotesque, we'll say, because this depiction of people is a somewhat grotesque depiction of people. Just because it's an asylum, just because it's an asylum doesn't mean you need to depict it this way. But he is depicting it in a way that frames it as grotesque. These colors, these hues, are very unnatural, right? These are hues that look like decay. Down here, we have the light source up here, but any figures are below it, well below it. The They're far from the light, far from the sight of polite society, right? Um, Far from the sight of polite society are these inmates in this asylum. And what happens down here? Like you said, they oh they seemed like scum. Well, that's interesting. You didn't know it was an asylum. They looked like scum. That is exactly what I'm talking about. Like a Fight Club, I get it. I see that. I see that. Yeah. Um, but that's like yeah. That's It's not wrong that that was your first impression because that's exactly what I'm saying. These choice of colors, this framing, these figures being far from the light. Sure, there's a metaphor there, right? About being they're put here so we don't have to think about them, basically, so they don't cause problems. Uh, but uh, it's also just the feeling that you picked up is exactly right. It is exactly right that the the framing of the painting, the way that these figures are in these unnatural colors, even the skin, this motley, uh, dirty hue between it's kind of between yellow and between yellow and green. A lot of it, not not at all tones that you would normally choose to render skin. A little bit in here, we get this like between red and yellow. This between red and yellow, that is more of a naturalish ish. We're not going all the way into natural skin tones, but it is a natural ish color. But for the most part, we're over here in the somewhere between like orange, green, and all the way over into like almost into like cyan with some of these. And you know, some of that is artifacting, passage of time, and so on. But in these central figures, where we see the brightest values, the difference in different hues being represented, it's very unnatural. And not just like to say nothing of like the figures that are less central. We're over here. We're not only are we in like somewhat natural skin tones, but the values are so low and they're interspersed with these like uh, greens, these desaturated dark greens that are mostly grays. They're mostly gray, but in the green family gives it that they look sick. They are sick, but he is representing that on their flesh uh, in this pose that is this grimace that tells you you aren't welcome. You don't belong. What are you looking at? Fucking punk. You come to gawk at the fucking crazies. Is that what you're here to do? You just came here to you came to just for the spectacle, right? For the freak show. That's what this person is saying. It is a admonishment of the viewer that I find very fun. I also find it fun that the grimacing crouched figure is their body is for the most part in the light. So you look here, and this is what your eye is drawn to naturally, right? And then just above it, your eye is drawn here, and just above it, this expression of what the fuck are you looking at? I really like that. But the composition is almost speaks for itself, but I am also here to speak for it. Uh, pure white up here. The light of God up here, pure white, um, gives way in one direction to the sky as it moves over to these are actually these hues are actually in the green family. They're not quite blue, but just say the bright light, the pure white, the light of God, gives way to greenish blues. They're grayish greens. Because they're gray for the most, they're very desaturated. It reads like blue to us because this the sky we're expecting blue. So these desaturated greens read like blue because that's what we're expecting. In this direction as well. These almost go into blue, but they're still just very desaturated greens. These colors up here are very desaturated versions of the sick, diseased greens down here. And I did find that technically very interesting. Yeah, this is a depiction of an asylum he visited. I do enjoy like the narrative element of paintings, but what I find also interesting to talk about is just like the technical aspect of it. Like, look, these are all of these colors are so unnatural to choose for these stones. And he was doing this from imagination, right? Because this is an asylum he visited when he was a youth, right? So this is all from imagination. This is constructed. This is his memory of the place is of a diseased, neglected, chaotic place, far beneath the notice or light of God. With some of these figures cast in complete shadow that renders them they're just silhouettes. As I talked about with one of the other paintings, we have these like we'll say like brighter areas, sure. They give way to midtones, right? Broadly speaking, and then we have these like very stark shadow shapes right? That they cut into the painting just to be like there's nothing to see here. They're interesting because they're people that are rendered to in silhouettes, but this cut in of darkness just says there's nothing to see here. You want to look this way, and then you have some partially rendered figures. I know that some amount of this is because again this is like 17 inches, meaning that this is much less than 17 inches. But the fact that this face is indistinct, uncanny, and like creepypasta ass dude over here, uh, it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to have this hollow, creepypasta ass, you know, aspect to it. But it does, as the transition into dark to light. I wouldn't. Well, not bright light, but this delicate difference in value is not so great, but it's enough that your eye is drawn to move in this direction. And the way that the face is depicted is so uncanny, surreal, grotesque, and these expressions. No, you'll notice that there's no light in any of these eyes, not a drop of white to, uh, to illuminate the expression of any of these people. The only one that seems to have some white in his eyes, some life in his eyes, is this guy, who these guys are fighting presumably um, to the death or until someone intervenes. But is anyone going to intervene? No. Only the man struggling for his life is allowed to have the light of life in his eye, in his expression at all. I find that interesting. And what is highlighted? No one's face. No one's face is really highlighted in this. They're present. They're present. There are faces with expressions that are all in the madness family. But what is actually highlighted is only the meat of the human, the muscles of the back, the tension in this conflict is what is the star of the show. Two people, most alive, most human even in this painting, are the ones who are fighting for it, fighting to see who gets to live and who gets to be at peace. And then, so in addition, this person who is, what the fuck are you looking at over here? We have this person who's very much enjoying the spectacle. Someone who just really likes seeing guys hurt each other is enjoying the show. Kind of enraptured, really, really enjoying it. There's a tiny spark, a second-hand spark of life in this eye, which may be mistaken for weathering. That is also present all over. But the closest that some people get to feeling alive is in the depths of madness is watching others suffer. The one in the fetal enjoy stream, this one, or this one. This one, I love again the body is in light to some degree. Right? There's this shape of light here. Yeah. Okay. Enjoys being spectated on. Interesting. I like that. I like that you have that impression. Maybe, huh? Because it's an excuse to express, this disdain, this disgust, or unless you're talking about this one, or maybe this person. Well, you said fetal possession, so it would be this person. Interesting. I don't read it that way, but I don't mind that. I don't mind that read. This one is just this mad, like hollering, this void for a mouth, hints of reflection in the eyes. I was just like, I read this as sort of like, maybe it's just like undirected, just yelling, but you, the intruder on the scene, are a target for it. But yeah, again, I like the way that the body is largely in light here. You move in from like the shadow of the lower body, beneath the body, the cast shadow down here. You move up the darkness of light here, or through the darkness here, to the light of the body. To this and then the face that is once again in shadow because it is dehumanizing. Yeah, but he his eyes are crazed, but he sees you. Uh, and so interesting. This like switch, or I think it's like a switch or whip or whatever this guy's holding. Um, this arc of light is another element that brings you to eye contact with this um, crazed person who is alerting or just acknowledging you by screaming, and the fact that the mouth is a void on all of these, but like the void is screaming at you from within this person. For what? No idea. No idea. Um, the tones in this person's leg are humanizing as well because this part of him is in light. Is in the light. They're um, they're kind of brown that doesn't exactly track with other shades here, but it is a more naturalistic choice for the skin tone of the legs. Um, it's also a tone that doesn't contrast too heavily with the very dark shadows down here. So he's not Goya isn't saying, "Hey, look at this leg," but it's partially in the light because it makes sense for the scene, of course, but also uh, as part of this shape here that leads us up to this crazed expression where you make eye contact with him and you know immediately that you've made a terrible mistake in doing so. Um, this person in the back, maybe welcoming you. I find that interesting. Hollow eyes, but a welcoming pose. And down here, there's something very sinister about the silhouetted face. It feels like, to me, this man could be perceiving you and hates you for an intruder who has no right to be uh, amongst the cast down and neglected who live in this diseased and lightless place where people feel only alive when they are uh, aware that they have a life worth struggling and that other people have lives worth struggling to snuff out. And over here, we're still in this diseased green family, but we veered almost into the blue. There's hints of a very desaturated cyan down here. Hints of a very desaturated cyan, where some light is leaking through, surrounding this person with the welcoming pose. The purity of a child. I see. Interesting. The purity of a child. Huh. I like it. I like your perspective, Prince Anime. Thank you. Which is such an ethereal, interesting, unsettling, and absolutely grotesque work that serves as a bridge from the court Goya, uh, to the later Goya, the Goya of the Black era, where we will find Saturn. Uh, Before we get there, of course, well, no, I said I'd go in chronological order, so I will do so. But the thing about these last couple works is that it's not clear. It's not clear when these works were created, because uh, it's not clear when these works were created because they were done on the inside of his house, on the walls of his house. Uh, a man who was deaf had left courtly life behind. Um, was probably sensed the Reaper's approach. We'll go to Saturn. Saturn devouring his son by Goya. Um, approximately 1820, 1823. Uh, uh, being born in 1746, he would have been 54 plus 20, at least 74 years old when he created this. And it is, I hesitate to talk too much about this work because it is certainly the most widely known and parodied and enjoyed in various ways. It is the Goya, we'll say. But I will just, as I did with the other works, I will just shut up for a second and let the work breathe while I drink some of my coffee. I got a fresh cup. Yeah. So uh, this is Goya's most famous work. What people have taken to calling um, Saturn devouring his son, and I say taken to calling that because this is there were 14 paintings on the walls of Goya's house, of the house of the deaf guy. Uh, of which this is one of them. These 14 were called the black paintings. Uh, I mean, why do we call them black paintings? Uh, they are. I don't actually know who coined that name, but they do have this very tenebrist, um, enveloping darkness. Tenebrist because it's more intense and it is deeper than what you would call like chiaroscuro or like uh other dark to lights. It is the darkness is enveloping. It invades the figures, its subject matter, up through here, up every direction. Darkness, 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 darkness. Madness in the eyes. Darkness coming through out of his mouth. Darkness. Um, and that's why I would call this tenebrist in its composition value value range. Right? Emerging from the darkness, being catching who we'll call Saturn, a Titan, devouring his devouring one of his children out of fear of being overthrown. And there are so many ways of interpreting this, but uh, and especially given that Goya himself provides no clarity, because this was not supposed to be seen by anyone, right? Um, this I don't know where to begin. The difference between we have the chronology of Goya's art. Age 28. Age 30, 31. Age 48. Age 74. It's such a narrative in itself. Um, if we do agree with the interpretation of this being Saturn devouring his son, There are many ways we can go with this narrative. So in the context of Goya's life, so we do know, for example, that he was fed up with Spanish nobility. He hated the Spanish nobility. He had seen the wars that they wage using people like the ones like his family, right, the lower middle class that he grew up with. I could see an interpretation of uh, Cronus, uh, Greek Cronus, in Roman Saturn, uh, the nobility devouring uh, those that might come after them, right? Uh, an old man, an old man who was facing down the end of his life, maybe, rather than a send up on um, the Spanish nobility that he hated and were the reason that he would leave shortly to Bordeaux in France, where he died. Maybe instead of that, maybe he empathizes with Cronus. Maybe he empathizes with Saturn. He's an old man who is at death's door. He is doing this unsightly, grotesque, impressionist work on the walls of his home. A man in that state of mind, I think, may be able to empathize with Cronus. Fear, mortal fear, at the end of his life. Uh, Maybe there some element of some part of him feels this desperation that we see in Saturn's face. Maybe some part of him would say, if uh, you know, like I could see this in myself, being willing to devour my young just to avoid being cast into the void that surrounds me and invades me. Uh, in terms of the technical elements, or the narrative, I find interesting. The technical elements are also interesting because he is still, uh, in some sense, every bit the master. Um, the craft, right, as opposed to the intention, the craft of this um, is still present. Uh, the dial is turned very far in one direction, so um, it's not in the delicate, time-consuming, agonizing rendering of realistic flesh that we see, or individual hairs. That is not where we see his mastery demonstrated here. His element of craft is not in this skin, right? It is the inventiveness, the use of craft to communicate intention. These are actually in the family of hues that would be somewhat natural, natural skin tones, especially. So for example, we'll take this. We'll take one of these and just change the value more than anything, and we get this skin tone that is pretty reasonable. Pretty reasonable. But we just turn down saturation. We're changing the hue a little bit, but mostly it's an issue saturation, and intersperse it with these splashes of different um, luminosity. They're in the same family, but they the way that they clash makes the diseased inner state of Saturn uh, something that he wears. He literally wears on his face, on his arms. The chaos that we sense in this expression and the desperation is painted into his flesh. in the patchwork, where it looks like this is literally like a stitch of flesh from some other creature that has been grafted onto Saturn or Cronus here. Uh, this is, in my opinion, a way that we can see uh, Goya's mastery of his craft being uh, present in the depiction, even though it's not through realism. The eyes don't need to be simplified like this in the way that they are. He wasn't so careful about getting a delicate, believable, realistic um, shape of an eye in the socket, uh, right in the orbital cavity. He didn't say, how does his eye sit in the orbital cavity here? Realistically, beneath the supraorbital ridge, right? Above these, relative to the zygomatic process. He wasn't thinking about all that. He said, this man is insane, and the way that I represent him frame him in darkness. How do I use my mastery of craft to depict that? And I can't imagine how he could have done it better. This is another belief that I hold personal is that style having exactly one style in which an artist works is probably maybe not the end goal, right? Because there's a style maybe you like that you like best, and that's completely fine. But the fluency of Goya to move into this style of depiction because it conveys or expresses what he needed to express is something that is another element, mastery of the craft, being demonstrated to move between what he could have done to what he did here. Is just demonstrates a fluency in the language of art, of visual representation. Um, other compositional elements may be less interesting for me to talk about. Of course, Cronus of Saturn, or we assume, is framed completely in black. All we care about is the personal intensity of what is happening with him and with his victim. So something I mentioned earlier, we have moved from the impersonal. Interesting. Well, you can construct a narrative here that is more personal and interesting, talking about, ooh, gotcha looking. The impersonal, because he's depicting nobility, whatever. Pretty nature to this, that there is personal elements here, extremely intense personal connection between the depths of emotion being felt by the people who are looking at you. We have moved from the impersonal to the deeply personal. The eye contact, the agony experienced by one person who, again, this is not what Goya looked like. This is not what Goya looked like, of course. But the intense agony felt by a single person is so powerful. Uh, that it just is. I don't know how else to put it. It's just it's if you really just make eye contact with him, look at him, look at what his pose is. His pose is grotesque. His flesh is grotesque. His act is grotesque. He is something is ripping him apart inside as he rips apart this victim. The groupings of light and dark, right, are very very deliberate. There is an impression that there's light coming from this like from up close to the viewer, um, and maybe above toward uh, Cronus or Saturn. In the way this light on this ass, it depicts the same thing. The light shapes are consistent, so there is a sense that there's less there's less craft at work here, but we have the lighting is also consistent. You should pay attention to that as well. It's very, very personal. Yeah. I would say it goes as far as to go as intimate. We have veered far enough into the personal that we have become intimate. And what is intimate is a very powerful place to be. These are emotions. This fear, this deep, desperate fear of being replaced, being usurped, not mattering, of becoming or remaining irrelevant, is something that I think it's a narrative that resonates across time for sure. Uh, we have moved into intimate feelings that are not expressed by many people, uh, but are deeply felt. It's also just in a shallower sense, it is also just freakier and more interesting to look at, um, because of these unnatural, rotten and diseased hues in the flesh, and this body being torn apart. Um, I mean, if we look, and this red is very interesting. The red of sort of dried blood being used to depict the person being ripped apart uh, is an interesting choice because this is probably fresh, but uh, as it flows down the body, it already has the look of um, old blood that is without without vitality. It's also a color that against the red itself is not very saturated or bright, but against this diseased flesh, it becomes vibrant. Isn't that interesting? It contrasts these uh, you know these tones and hues are all they seem green, don't they? But no, these are all in sort of the orange family, reds and oranges here that look green because they're desaturated to this red that looks red. It's just the power of contrast. Um, and I will harp on this again. The power of contrast, understood by someone who is a master of his craft. These aren't greens. These are reds and oranges, desaturated, and these are just more in the red family. I just find that terribly interesting. And even these this patch of darkness here is a compositional choice. It's very easy to take in this darkness. He could have made more of this dark um, flesh, just rendered it up here, but it's very easy for the eye to travel through total darkness or to skip over it. So we skip over this because that's not the point. The point is all up here. And I don't have a lot to say about this piece. It's most famous, most discussed. Um, the one that this is what Goya means to people. Would you like the blood running down the hands too? It's interesting. And this for how grotesque the figure looks and misshapen, and where it looks like the flesh has fallen away from him, even though it's all there, because some of it's in light, some of it's in shadow. It looks like he's missing some of his arm. Um, for all of these like strange shapes and such, this hand, holy shit, this dude has drawn a lot of hands and he's really good at it. As the hands just like tear into someone, you look at these the knowledge of anatomy to catch these highlights on the knuckles. It's all there. It's still there. The craft, the mastery, it's still there. This little patch of highlight. It all speaks to someone who is so fucking good. It's literally insane. And then we'll move to a painting from the same era, uh, from the walls of the House of the Deaf Guy. Let's propose the Fates. This is incredible, intense, intimate, um, and eye-catching. God, look at that! It's incredible. Like the foreshadowing on the nose. You know the shape of the nose, all believable, and yet uncanny. Um, I like this one. I like the Fates. Or they're called the Fates, I should say, because like Saturn devouring his sun, it is a. They're called the Fates, but it may just be a projection. It may just be a projection of art historians or whoever discovered this art on the walls of his house. Oh, by the way, Saturn devouring his sun was transferred to canvas, so it exists on canvas now. But despite its origin as like a deeply personal piece, maybe he also just thought this was a really cool story, and he wanted to depict it because we remember that Goya didn't necessarily have all these like highbrow ideas. He did. They were there, especially by the end of the life. By the end of someone's life, um, we would expect their aspects of themselves that are by nature less developed to have become more developed. So by 72, this sort of like intimate feeling uh, and like maybe philosophical this aspect of himself that was not naturally very prominent of like art. By 72, I think he would have developed this side of himself. It would have been natural for that to happen. So, but then there's always also the possibility that he just thought this was cool. He just really liked this story, and like I was with the Fates, uh, why do I like the Fates so much? Um, this was I don't know. I mean, there are reasons to think these are the Fates, right? The scissors, right, are Atropos would have used scissors to cut the threads of fate, right? Uh, so maybe he was making his house into a grotesque homage to Greek and Roman myth, right? Which is fucking incredible. It's awesome. Imagine this is just a wall of your house, and with this depiction of this myth, and then another one of your walls is this one. That's fucking awesome, right? Exactly, exactly. So he had the capacity. Maybe he just it's like decorating your Twitch channel. If you're a proficient artist and a streamer, it's just like this is how I want my house to look. These diseased, grotesque color traces. These diseased, grotesque color traces. Um, this is just the vibe. This is how he was feeling in those years of his life, and he had every right to, having lived through the times that he did. Um, it's just very fascinating to see the limited range of in the color family. We're here between orange and green for a lot of these, between orange and green. But we do move into the almost completely desaturated blacks in many places. Here, obviously here, silhouetting this figure. The only things implying the shape of the body are these highlights here. I like this expression, almost sardonic, right? That's something I don't think I didn't do that I should have done. But to go in here and look at the textures, because another thing about this painting that is so remarkable is the textures, the violent textures here. That it's like, did he even do this with a brush? Holy shit! Like it has a sensation of like dry paints being scraped and blended with each other. Look at this red in the shadow here that you can only notice if you get up real close. The blood from it mirrors and matches some of the colors that are down here in the blood. which has the effect of harmonizing. Even if you don't know the reds are here, the fact that they're there harmonizes this with this, makes it feel whole. And that's an interesting thing that we I like to look at these works and also think about what can I take away from this for my own craft. The outlining of the features in this pure black. A shorthand that a lot of artists use these days. But I love to get in close at this work and look at it, like the blending on this, the humanity of the flesh of this uh, tortured and torn apart figure. So interesting. And even in the dark shadows here, we have these shapes and brushwork that implies depth to the shadows. I love these like these striations. They're almost like it's almost like hatching in these different colors. It's so fascinating to see. It's so fun to look at too. But you can see the brush being dragged. You can see the direction of it. You can see this like choppy brush strokes here. Imagine his wrist. This old man on the wall of his home. These choppy brush strokes, just chopping this shit out, chopping out this diseased figure onto his living space. It's just so fun to imagine. And as we move down, we can see the texture is chaotic, apparently, but also uniform. Smooth brushstrokes to create this chaotic patch of diseased flesh. And then down here we have a little bit of chaos. But if you look this closely, this brushwork here, these strokes imply some cross contouring that give more volume to this leg. And you can pick that out because you can see the brushwork here. You can see that the way this patch of light was was etched onto darker tones. So maybe this was supposed to be a light patch that was all like this color. But he said, you know what? I want this to be like violently bright, so it looks like this dude just like someone just grafted some skin here. And then you can see that like cross contouring that wraps around the leg. Or he was like, this leg looks way too flat. I don't like this. How do we make it look less flat? Well, this gross yellow bile color. Let's do that, and let's make it take some contours on this leg. I find that very interesting. And then you get just a little bit of the implication of the like calf and the anatomy of this lower leg. But it fades into darkness so much so that it's you could read this as at a glance Cronus being an amputee. He does not care at all about the details of this foot. He lets it fade into shadow, into a strange abstract shape. And you can see the brushwork here where there's like some implication that there's like something's protruding here. Something's fading into shadow. But we don't care about that, so it's not detailed. And I love that. I love that. Letting details fade into the shadows. Right? Yeah. The abstraction of the elements that aren't don't really matter. It also adds to the sort of grotesque and fantastical element. Like, what the fuck is this? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. Um, it like doesn't really make sense, but it not in a way that distracts you from what matters. Right up here, the brightest patch of the thing closest to a pure white. It's right up here on the muscular back of this figure being devoured and ripped apart, devoured and ripped apart, of course, because this, if you think about this whole figure here, this torso is being stretched somehow. Somehow, of course, that being right here. And these highlights across the knuckles and the fingers are also interesting elements. They just say, look here. Yeah. The focus is so prominent. These reds, look here, look here. Look at this violence. Look at this torment. But then, being that our eyes are naturally drawn to faces, we are drawn first to the violence of this color and value play, and then also to this expression. And I think that's just looking more closely at this piece, kind of just it tells you even more elements of craft at work. Even though this is people might look at this and go, well, like this is like such an ugly, unrealistic um, drawing that is he is like in his old age, maybe his skills are decaying, and that's why he would paint something like this. But no, I think that when we look at Saturn devouring his younger or Cronus or whatever, Saturn devouring his son, as it's called, we can see that he is still every bit the master he was. He's just choosing not to render out the eyes. But when you look at the anatomy of this back, this hand, everything, it's all still there, of course. And then the fates. I just think it's a really cool scene, a really cool, fantastical scene. Very interesting colors. And keep in mind that he is still a romantic era painter. This this kind of painting is a herald of the modernist era, um, the impressionist, the so-called unrealistic, depictions. But it's just the fact that it came from the same hands as the parasol, the house of the hunter, yeah, uh, the retriever, I should say, the retriever, the house of the retriever, courtyard with lunatics. The fact that it came from the same hands is so interesting. And this is another reason I think he definitely deserves the title of like the last of the old masters, is because this is a different era. This is a different epoch on display in this painting. It was a mural in oil painting. The Atropos and the Moirai, the fates, and so on and so on. The scissors representing the scissors that we used to cut the threads of fate. Um, and this landscape that is very abstracted is so interesting as well. Or these silhouettes, a lot of elements in this are darkness with just light to give us a silhouette, and that's something about that is such a powerful technique to have pure darkness or something close to it in a piece with so much color, and to have it not look distractingly unnatural. Of course, it looks unnatural, right? But supernatural, more than unbelievable in such a way that makes the whole piece unappealing. And there's a unity in this disgusting hues that he chose. It looks gangrenous. Something about the fates being present in this landscape makes the whole thing gangrenous. Again, rotting like to Goya's mind, rotting like Spain, rotting like his ebbing life, his ebbing vitality. And by this time, he has been sick. He has been deaf. He has lost. He has risen and fallen. And so, in some element, this it feels like this gangrenous element in his work is an expression of the decay of himself and his country at the end of his life. These tones here that look blue, right? That contrast. Maybe this is an artifact of the scanning or whatever. But these tones are almost blue. They are still in that red orange family. It's just that they're desaturated and placed in contrast with these in the same family. Makes them appear blue. These cool tones. There are some very few blues sprinkled in here, but for the most part, we're working with desaturated reds and oranges and greens and yellows. Mostly desaturated reds, red, orange, green, yellow, to create the shadows and the silhouettes of this piece. I love the simple these the elegant simplicity of these like highlights that add so much depth. I love the minimalist um brushwork. One stroke, two stroke, this, and this is a sash. These are like these are like broad strokes, and then a couple highlights or like a couple midtones, and then you can see the highlights layered on top. It's just so deliberate, so interesting. These huge patches of nothing, of like darkness, right? They're so adventurous to just and like it's one thing to have, well, this person's body is in shadow, right? It's one thing to have this. By the way, there's actual dark blue interspersed in the shadow to cool the shadow even further. Because one way to conceive of shadows is not dark versus light. Not it's not just this to this. It's also warm. It's also warm, warmer colors to cooler colors. Also creates the effect of shadow, right? So you intersperse this darkness with some really dark deep blues to cool the shadow even further. But it's one thing to have these big silhouettes, right? Where like this person's body is in shadow, but to be able to create these pockets of nothing that still read so well and so interesting on the face, even, it's just it's just so like it's inspiring, honestly, and it's so interesting. And like this reads as a hand as it should, but it's just like a few sloppy blocks of brushwork to create this hand. And these interesting faces, crones, like this like receded mouth and lips from teeth being lost to time. So interesting. And I love this work visually um, for how well executed it is. Um, Something again, also always fun to talk about the dimensions of this. So the vertical breadth is 48 inches, 4 feet, 4 feet of this wall, top to bottom, by 105 inches. So 48, so that would be like 123 centimeters by the 3 centimeters by 266. The scale. The scale of this, and to still choose these simple, um, but not simple, but simplified um, shapes and to execute it so well. Just incredible. Goya is phenomenal. And this work, this last black era of paintings that he decorated his house with, um, a you can see the why he's often called the last old master, because these are modernist works executed by uh, a master who trained in Rome, painted royalty, and at the end of his life, at the I would say still at the end of his life, at the height of his mastery, still how he chose to create and express. And that is what I have to say about Goya for today. Uh, Went for about 3 hours. Well, it'd be like that sometimes. I had fun. I was trying to be quick too, but yeah, that's Goya. That is today's art appreciation on Goya. Thanks so much for being here, for watching, listening, hanging out, offering commentary, being and being so cool, being so very cool. Oh, it's fucking awesome, Professor June. Thanks. Uh, you're funny. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Denko, for it was fun. For having fun with me as I indulge myself because this is something that I just find really fun to do. Um, it's like when I'm playing Balatro and I'm just talking about like, oh, this is what I'm thinking about my hand right now. Like this is just when I look at Goya and when I look at these works, it's just the thoughts I have, and it's so gratifying to be able to share them with people who um, I find them interesting and who can offer their own insights. I love it so much, and you guys are great. Uh, Thanks for being here, chatting, enjoying, arting, encouraging, and have a lovely day or evening, whatever time it is. You deserve it. Bye bye.